Our minds are just incredible prediction machines, right? But sometimes they can play some serious tricks on us. We see a story, we spot a pattern, and boom, we make a bet. But what if that very same mental shortcut, the thing that makes our brains so fast and efficient, is actually the thing that leads us to bet on the completely wrong horse? Well, today, we are going to dive headfirst into a really powerful mental trap that honestly affects every single one of us. So, you ready? Let's put it to the test. How good are you, really, at telling the difference between a good story and the actual cold, hard odds? I'm going to walk you through a classic little experiment here, and it reveals this fascinating glitch in our thinking. Let's see how you do. Okay, let's kick things off with part one of our little puzzle. And don't worry, this first task is super simple. It's really just about applying some basic logic to what you probably already know about the world. No tricks, well, not yet anyway. Okay, so on the screen, you'll see 9 different fields of graduate study. Now, I want you to imagine we've just picked a random grad student out of a hat. Let's call him Tom W. Your only job right now is to rank these fields based purely on the number of students enrolled in them. That's it. So which field do you think has the most students? That's number 1. The one with the fewest? That's number 9. Just go with your gut, your best guess. So, what you just did there, whether you knew it or not, was an exercise in estimating something called base rates. It sounds fancy, but it's really just the statistical reality of a situation. The actual percentage of grad students in humanities versus, say, computer science. When you have absolutely no other information, starting with the base rate is the most logical thing you can do. And, for the record, fields like humanities and education have way, way more students than something like library science.
All right, so you've got your logical, statistics-based ranking all set. But this is where the plot thickens. Now we're going to introduce just one new piece of information into the mix, a little personality sketch of our mystery student, Tom W.
Okay, so listen to this description. It was supposedly written by a psychologist after an interview. Tom has a need for order and clarity. His writing is rather dull and mechanical, but it's occasionally enlivened by somewhat corny puns and flashes of imagination of the sci-fi type. And, get this, he seems to have little feel and little sympathy for other people and doesn't really enjoy interacting with them. Wow, that paints a pretty specific picture, doesn't it? So here's your second task. And this is important. Forget all about the student numbers you were just thinking about. Completely. Based only on that personality sketch, I want you to rank those 9 fields again. But this time, you're ranking them based on how well Tom's personality fits the stereotype of a typical student in that field. How similar is he? Where does this guy fit in? Okay, so if you're like pretty much everyone else who's done this, you probably shot computer science or engineering right up to the top of the list, right? I mean, the corny puns, the sci-fi imagination, it just screams a certain kind of nerdy stereotype. And I bet you put something like humanities or social work way, way down at the bottom. And you're not wrong to think that. The description was literally designed to make you think that way. So now we've got 2 completely different rankings, right? One is based on cold, hard statistics, those base rates, and the other is based on a compelling story, the stereotype. And this is where the trap gets sprung. This is where we pit likelihood against likeness, logic against gut feeling. All right, here it is, the final and most important question. Taking everything into account now, the base rates you thought about first, and that personality sketch, what is the most likely fields Tom W. is in? Think about it for a second. Go ahead and lock in your final answer. And here is the big reveal. I'm willing to bet your intuition, your gut, was screaming computer science. It just feels right, doesn't it? It fits the story perfectly. But the statistical reality, it tells a completely different tale. The fields with the most students, by a long shot, are actually humanities and education. So even if Tom is the walking, talking stereotype of a computer scientist, the sheer number of students in other fields makes it statistically way more likely he's in one of them. Your gut was basically fighting a losing battle against the odds. So if you felt that incredibly strong pull toward computer science, congratulations. You have just experienced something called the representativeness heuristic. It's this mental shortcut we all use where we judge how likely something is not based on logic or stats, but by how much it represents or matches a stereotype we have in our head. We basically swap a really hard question, what is the actual probability, for a much easier one. How similar is this story to my stereotype? So when we fall for this trap, our intuition actually commits 2 pretty big sins, or errors. Let's break down exactly why this powerful gut feeling so often leads us down the wrong path. So what are these two sins? Well, the first one is we totally ignore base rates. We get so wrapped up in a good story that we start confidently predicting really rare things just because they fit the narrative. And the second sin? We completely ignore the quality of the evidence. A story can be so compelling, so vivid, that we just believe it, even if we should be way more skeptical.
Let's make this even more real. Picture this. You're on the New York subway. You look over and you see a person, and they're just completely absorbed in reading the New York Times. Now, what's the smarter bet about that person? That they have a PhD, or that they don't even have a college degree? The stereotype here is super powerful, right?
And this just perfectly illustrates the point. The better bet, by far, is that they do not have a college degree. And you're probably thinking, no way, but why? It's all about the base rates. There are just astronomically more people without college degrees riding the subway than there are people with PhDs. The story our brain creates is misleading, but the numbers don't lie. And that second sin, ignoring how good the evidence actually is, that's powered by this simple little rule our brain loves to follow. It's called YUSAT, which stands for what you see is all there is. Think about it. Even if you're told a piece of information might be totally unreliable, like that sketch of Tom W., your brain just doesn't care. It takes whatever you give it and immediately gets to work building the most believable story it can. We are just wired to use information, not question it. Okay, so it kind of sounds like our brains are just wired to fall for this trap, right? But here's the good news. We are not helpless. We can actually learn to discipline our intuition. So the big question is, how do we fight back? How do we build a better thought process? Well, it really all comes down to two key steps. Step one, you have to anchor your judgment on a plausible base rate. You have to force yourself to think about the underlying stats first. Then, step two, you have to question the diagnosticity of your evidence. That's just a fancy way of asking, how much should this new information really tell me? Let me boil it down into two simple questions you can use every single day. First, before you jump to any conclusion, just stop and ask yourself, what are the odds to begin with? That right there, that's your anchor. Then, when you get some compelling news story or a piece of data, you ask, okay, how much should this really change my mind? Is this new evidence actually strong enough to overcome those initial odds?
I mean, think about it in the real world. Imagine a business pitch for some hot new tech startup. The story is amazing, the founders are charming, it just feels like it cannot fail. But someone who's using this disciplined thinking would step back and say, whoa, hold on a second. The base rate of success for a startup in this industry is extremely low. What concrete evidence do we actually have that this case is so different from the thousands of others that have failed?
Look, this isn't just some abstract mental puzzle. This is about how we evaluate everything. News headlines, business deals, political candidates, even the people we meet every day. Our minds just absolutely love a good story, a neat, tidy narrative. So the final question I want to leave you with is this. As you go about your day, where is a compelling story fooling you?